The reality is the poverty of Africa is the glory of some civilizations. Poverty is an industry. Ignorance is an industry, big industry. And there are those who want Africa to continue to wallow in poverty and to wallow in ignorance because it is their safest bet to their continued benefit.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I really hope you're all doing fine from wherever you're watching me from. Now, I'm sharing this clip and this very great speech from PLO Lumumba, a very renowned Pan-Africanist who has been talking about the effects of neo-colonialism and the continued exploitation of the African continent. Now, he says that there is need for us to unite from Africa to the diaspora, then to make Africa a self-sustained continent, to make ourselves more developed and well informed of whatever we should do to make sure that we unite. So let's watch this video, then have a very quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
That the world is full of benevolent individuals and institutions whose only claim to fame is that they want to lift Africa from the morass that she now finds herself in. The reality is the poverty of Africa is the glory of some civilizations. Poverty is an industry. Ignorance is an industry, big industry. And there are those who want Africa to continue to wallow in poverty and to wallow in ignorance because it is their safest bet to their continued benefit. The day we wake up to that reality, the safer we are. That is why the English had this beautiful saying, "Let sleeping dogs lie." So we are sleeping, and we are being allowed to lie. And we are being hypnotized into even greater sleep and slumber, to dream even further. But I'm telling us, if Africa is to realize our dream, we must wake up. If Africa is to win the lottery, we must buy the lottery ticket. Why are we ring-fencing 30%? Let us ring-fence 70%. It can't be done because it is a question of cross-fertilization of ideas. We must learn from other civilizations, but learning must not mean surrendering to them. I'm submitting to us that we surrender to them. And going forward, therefore, you who are present here, we must think of another Africa. An Africa where when we talk about technology, whether it is in solar technology today, Morocco, and I stand to be corrected, is engaged in developing one of the largest solar farms anywhere in the world. I'm still talking about consulting engineers even in that field. Kenya is doing another major solar project, and all African countries ought to be engaged in it. Namibia, I think, is also engaged in it. But if you ask who the consulting engineers are for those projects, they are not Africans. Even the solar panels that are going to be used, the best that African countries will do is to assemble them. They'll be brought as completely knocked down kits, and ours is to assemble them as our children assemble Lego. We are talking about water and water, which is an important thing, and water engineering. And we have consulting engineers in that regard. Even when we talk about water engineering and the drilling equipment, I know of no African country that makes water drilling equipment. Perhaps South Africa. South Africans correct me. When we are talking about road infrastructure, I know that sometimes even when we are doing the roads, even the one here, the Kampala and Tebe Expressway, the contractors, under the guise of something that they now call design and build, will even import steel from their countries, saying that ours has too much carbon content. Sometimes even cement is imported because ours is claimed not to have certain ingredients. I'm still talking about consulting engineers. When we are doing our railways, we may celebrate them all we want, but when we receive the wagons, they are rehabilitated engines that belong to the museums alongside the spinning wheel. I'm submitting to us that the consulting engineer is important to Africa's growth and development. You cannot deny that. And I can see the vision. I can see what the African leaders were thinking about when they met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and came up with Agenda 2063. They were looking at the engineer and they were saying that the engineer, well, if he is a civil engineer, let him be an African civil engineer who is aware of the African terrain. Let him be an engineer who is equipped with what he or she needs to grow Africa, so that when he or she is engaged in designing and ultimately presiding over the building of African roads, he knows he is our continent. That is what they were thinking. So that when they are building this road across the continent, the equatorial forest of Congo, they are building and they are empowering other African engineers. I saw them thinking about that. They must have been thinking about hydroelectric power, and they were thinking about generating power from the nearly 1,270 hydroelectric power stations that we have built. They were thinking of geothermal, and they were thinking of consulting engineers who have African experience and know Africa and relate with other civilizations in a manner that is beneficial to Africa. They must have been thinking like that. When they were thinking about fuel, fossil fuel, and they were thinking about the pipeline, they must have been thinking about chemical engineers and other related engineers who would be doing things for the benefit of Africa. They were thinking about aeronautical engineers that would be capable not only of ensuring that the planes that are made in Europe and America fly, but who are moving progressively to ensuring that even Africa can produce an aircraft. The Brazilians have done it in our lifetime. But today, that is not the truth. So, fellow engineers, if I have dampened your spirit, that was my intention. Because it is those dampened spirits that are capable of providing a fertile ground for the fruit of growth to germinate. This continent is capable of achieving much. Africa today has a population of 1.1 billion. We are 55 countries, and all the 55 countries, our economy is only as big as that of India. We can do better. And if we are going to do better, I have no doubt in my mind that you great minds that are gathered here, because the minds that are present here are some of the best minds that Africa can offer. Let it not be business as usual. Let it not be that you have expanded your firm to include 100 engineers to do work that has been handed down to you by some European or Chinese firm. No. Let it be that you are also capable of doing things in your own right. You can do it. You must do it. Because if you don't do it, the thing that we call growth will never be realized. We'll have symbols of what we describe as growth, but Africa will never grow. We'll have things that appear to represent growth, but Africa will never have grown. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to remind you and to remind myself that if Africa is to realize our potential in the world of infrastructure, because as the Vice President rightly said, if you have infrastructure, it has an impact on agriculture. It has an impact on mining. It has an impact on the health sector. It has an impact in every other sector in our economies. It can be done. It must be done. And you are the ones who are going to do it. And remember that the world is not very kind. All of us know. Every other person in every other part of the world is trying to ensure that they are at the top of the food chain. Where is Africa in the food chain? Are we at the bottom of the food chain, or we are at the top of the food chain? I am saying we are at the bottom, and going forward we must fight our way to ensure that we are beginning to talk about things like nanotechnology. What are we teaching in our universities? Most of our universities, faculties of engineering have equipment that were used in Europe during the industrial age. I'm saying this rather melodramatically, but I'm making my point. We must change. There must be a linkage between the practicing consulting engineer and the universities. There must be a linkage between that and industry. It cannot be right that in this day and age, that linkage is not there. And I believe that under the aegis of Gamma and FIDIC, it can be done, and that deliberate efforts are going to be made to ensure that we move in that positive direction so that Agenda 2063 is realized and the promises under the Sustainable Development Goals are also realized. I want to conclude with this. Have you realized that several years ago we had something called the Millennium Development Goals? They were never achieved. So we have renamed them Sustainable Development Goals, and there are more now. So the truth is, Africa must also define her own problems, and having defined her own problems, must also find solutions to her own problem. Do not be cheated. Do not be deluded that the world is full of benevolent individuals and institutions whose only claim to fame is that they want to lift Africa from the morass that she now finds herself in. The reality is, the poverty of Africa is the glory of some civilizations. Poverty is an industry. Ignorance is an industry, big industry. And there are those who want Africa to continue to wallow in poverty and to wallow in ignorance because it is their safest bet to their continued benefit. The day we wake up to that reality, the safer we are. That is why the English had this beautiful saying, let sleeping dogs lie. So we are sleeping, and we are being allowed to lie. And we are being hypnotized into even greater sleep and slumber, to dream even further. But I'm telling us, if Africa is to realize our dream, we must wake up. If Africa is to win the lottery, we must buy the lottery ticket. God bless. I am telling us, as I remember the Osagie for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, that now, as you turn in your grave, if you had been alive, you'd possibly be 107 years today. But your people, some of them, in their lack of wisdom, chose to remove you from power. I apologize on their behalf. They gave you only a few years to be present in this world. And during those few years that you are present in this world, you shook not only Ghana but Africa so very fundamentally that although your mortal remains were interred, your spirit is alive and well. And it's that spirit that occupies our minds and hearts today as we remind ourselves that the only way in which Africa will realize our potential is through the path of unity. I know as you lie in your grave, great Osagyefo, there is a sense in which, in a manner so completely invisible to us, you are turning uncomfortably and weeping uncontrollably, because your continent is bleeding. It is bleeding in every corner. In her heart in the Congo, she bleeds. That country that is so rich is yet the poorest nation in Africa. But it does not stop bleeding only in the Congo. It also bleeds in our Horn in Somalia. That country, which could be very rich, is only famous for the wrong things. Men killing men for no reason. But it doesn't stop bleeding there. It is also bleeding in our armpit in Equatorial Guinea, that country that God gave so much oil. That oil was long captured by one family, and they are using it for their benefit to the detriment of their people. And it doesn't stop bleeding there. In Central African Republic and in Libya and in Mauritania and in Mali, your continent is torn asunder. And we who have gathered here today are asking ourselves the fundamental question: what must we do to save Africa? And that is why today, when we are looking at Africa and when we are remembering you on that 24th day of May in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, we cannot help but remember how animated you are. We cannot help but remember that what you saw 50 years ago is turning out to be as evergreen as when you spoke them. You told us then that our unity was going to be our salvation from other civilization. Today, Africa is said to be rising. But the question we are asking, for whom is Africa rising? Today, the minerals in our belly are being exploited, Osagyefo. The uranium in Niger is being taken away from France to France. The manganese in Ghana, in your own country, is being taken away. Even the cocoa, which you must have consumed as a young man, is taken away in the same manner that God made it to be converted into something in Switzerland. Your people have not learned to add value to it. They have an apology for a factory in Takoradi, but it does very little, Osagyefo. In other words, there is a lot to be done. We can hear you telling us that we need to have free movement of goods and services in this continent. I can now inform you that when they met on the 27th day of July in Kigali, Rwanda, they created a passport, but that passport is only known to the president. The people of Africa have no idea what it is. But they have started, so we must believe that going forward, every African will carry what is an African passport which will allow them to move, as you contemplated, from Dakar in Senegal to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, from Cape Town in South Africa to Cairo in Egypt, and that they'll be able to move without free let and hindrance. For we remember you. But we also remind ourselves that when we talk about unity, we are not saying that we should strike down our is perhaps, with due respect to them, Africa's curse. The day the African politician realizes that the occupation of political office and political space is one of servant leadership, that is the day Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician realizes that the occupation of public space and public office is an honor and a privilege, that is the day Africa begins to move in the right direction. The day the African politician recognizes that the occupation of office is not one for the privatization of public wealth, that is the day Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician recognizes that they do not have the monopoly of wisdom, that is the day that Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician realizes that longevity in office is not the solution to African problems, that is the day Africa begins to realize the potential. The day that the African politician begins to remember that the electoral vote is a charge for them to deliver on health, on agriculture and education, that is the day Africa will begin to know her place in the world. The day the African politician is liberated from the chains of greed, that is the day that Africa will realize the potential. And I say all that because it is not lost on me that one of the reasons why Africa cannot unite is because we have become so used as politicians in Africa to our little countries where we are treated like demigods. And because we too, we who are the led, we have treated our leaders as demigods for too long, and they now are conditioned to believe that they are gods. You know, respecting leaders is a good thing because that is what is right. Once you have given people the privilege to serve you, you give them respect. But respect must be earned. Many times in my own country, in Kenya, I see the individuals, some of the individuals that we elect into public office, some are fine, but some are not. In fact, most are not. And in my rural village, they elect some semi-illiterate individual who everybody knows is semi-illiterate and everybody knows he is not wise. But the day after his election, when he attends a forum such as this, those who invite him to speak will say, let so-and-so whom we elected yesterday share his wisdom with us. And I want to assure you that there is no magic in the ballot box. Of zero in mathematics. When they did not know about Caesarean section, operations of that nature already taking place in the continent of Africa, when they were dying in snow and in ice, in Ethiopia, in Axum, they were already building the underground edifices in Lalibela. They were building pyramids in Sudan and in Egypt. There are already libraries in Carthage. Pythagoras and all these people were already learning their philosophy from Orunmila among the Yoruba. We were there. We had a culture that was complete with science, complete with mathematics, complete with the arts. And when they say we have no art, they forget that they have stolen all of them, and they are to be found in the museums in Europe. If we had no culture, and if we could not do the things they say we could not do, why were they plundering the things that they plundered? Why? Because we had a culture, and what you do is that you destroy a people's culture, and then you create another culture and make them think like you want them to think. This is what they did, not only to us who remained in the mother continent, they did it even to our brothers and sisters who are taken to the Caribbean, those who are taken to the Northern America, those who went to Southern America. They did it, and they took away our language. And if you doubt me, I want you to watch Alex Haley's Roots and see how the main character, Kunta Kinte, was beaten that he may abandon his name and acquire a new culture. But those who have a culture and those who believe in it will never abandon it. That is why we are remembering Omuka Makabarega, because he stood tall. Those of you who do not know will remember that incident in a hostel where the Omukama's arm had been amputated and he kicked one of them. The time to kick them is now. The time to kick them is now, because when we kick them, then they'll realize that our culture was not dead. Our culture was merely in comatose. And we are beginning to rise. And we are beginning to redefine what development is. The great Ghanaian Nana Kobina Nketiah V has written a book which I commend to all of us, The Place of Culture in Governance, the Ghanaian example. And he tells us that he has over the years looked at governance in Africa, just like we have. And the governance structures that we inherited have not served us well. If you look at Uganda, since she earned her political independence, the history of Uganda is replete with painful moments. The history of Sudan, painful moments. Somalia, painful moments. Ghana, painful moments. Congo, painful moments. Rwanda, painful moments. Burundi, painful moments. Nigeria, painful moments. Algeria, painful moments. Liberia, painful moments. South Africa, painful moments. Zimbabwe, painful moments. It has been a history of pain because our culture was taken away. And when we thought that we had a solution to our problems, a new wound appeared. How many of you remembering in 1980s when they came here and told us the solution to the African problem is multi-party politics? And we believed. We formed parties. In the Democratic Republic of Congo at one time there were 233 of them. We formed them. We started holding elections. Then we discovered that in Africa we can hold elections. You can have the highest number of votes, but he who is announced the winner is the winner, the number of votes notwithstanding. We discovered that. Then we are asking ourselves, what can we do? If this foreign culture has failed to solve our problems, we thought that when we regained independence using other people's culture, our education would help us. Today, We have many graduates from our many universities, but yet we can't solve our medical problems. In Uganda, it is only those who cannot afford medical attention in Europe or India or Dubai or South Africa who go to Murago. In Kenya, it is the same. In most Africa, it's the same. So even the promises we made to ourselves about development in medicine, we have not realized them. Then we said we would have education, and we have universities, and we teach engineering in those universities. But when we want to build roads, we want to build the expressway from Kampala to Entebbe, it is not the Ugandans who do it, it's the Chinese who do it. When we want to build expressway in Nairobi, it's the Chinese who do it. When we want to build anything in Africa, it's the Chinese who do it. What happened to our engineering? When we want to do anything, we still depend on them, and our problems still continue. We still send our young men and women to the Arab world, to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to all those other countries. And those who don't send take themselves there by crossing the Mediterranean Sea. What happened to us? Do we still have the spirit of Omukama Kabarega? Oh, we are weak and conquered and captured. This is the question that we must ask this morning or this afternoon. What is the place of culture? There are those who say that Africa is too diverse. There are too many cultures. Which one will we adopt? Is it that of the Bunyoro Kitara? Is it that of the Baganda? Is it that of the Batoro? Is it that of the Basoga? Is it that of any of our many communities, or the Zulu, or the Kosa, or the Pedi, or the Kakan, or the Yoruba, or the Temne, or the Mende? We ask. Who said that we cannot have a mixture of those cultures? Who said that we cannot borrow that which is good in the Toro culture or the Yoruba culture? Who said that when we combine them, we cannot come with a system that will then fit us? Who said? Who is telling us that? Today, as we remember Omukama Kabarega, we are reminding ourselves that we can do it. We can do it because history has demonstrated that it can be done. You know.
Hello, brothers and sisters. I really hope you're all doing fine. Now, if you're not doing fine, take a moment and do fine. It is very important to be fine, and it is also okay not to be fine. So, I really want us to talk about this video in a very few minutes, right? And let's say this, that we black people have not been fair on how we treat Pan-Africanists. We've not been fair on how we serve justice to them, because one thing I know, that we really do ignore these people until they are gone. I'll tell you about a guy. If you do not know about him, I'll tell you to take a moment, take your phone, and Google someone called John Magufuli. He was the president of Tanzania, and he died in a mysterious way during the COVID-19 times. Now, this man was known to have said no to the Western policies. He really did wonderful things, and he said, we do not want Western interference in this country, that we must stop this nonsense that is happening in Tanzania. So this man was so radical, and he did upset the orders from the West. And I remember there is a time he even fired some Chinese men. He even closed some embassies that he said were using public money, that public money was being used to fund these embassies. And the government officials used to travel to the US just to go and be given orders and come back at the expense of the taxpayers' money. Now, when he said no to these things, he started receiving a lot of criticism from CNN and BBC. Later on, we saw world leaders talking about him. And 4 years later, he died in a mysterious way. So I really feel there is at times we should appreciate people like PLO Lumumba. It is not easy to talk about Pan-Africanism at the moment because money has been buying African leaders for the longest time. They have sold their conscience, they have sold their souls, and they continue doing bad things. They continue worshipping the oppressor. They still have to take trips to the US, to France, to go and report to Macron. This is whatever we are doing, sir. So, at the expense of the taxpayers' money, well, doctors are on strike in their countries, when people are not receiving good government services. So there is need for us to talk about these things. And when we say that Africa should unite, when we say that we are going to support a Pan-Africanism in Africa, it is not an easy thing. When we see these leaders talking about Pan-Africanism, how the African continent should collaborate for the collective good of the continent, and how different countries in Africa, or all countries, should come together, talk about colonialism, the slavery, and call for reawakening African consciousness into this era that we are living in. How are we going to tell our children? How am I going to tell my brother or my grandson someday that we were there, they took this continent, and we are back into slavery? We have not been out of slavery. And I know it is just slavery slowed down because we started talking for ourselves. We started having leaders who are very conscious of whatever was happening, and they started saying, no, we are not going out of this world to accept these things to happen to our people. Later on, after Kwame Nkrumah was thrown out of power by the Western countries for talking about black unity, after Muammar Gaddafi was thrown out of power and killed because of talking of African unity, and after when people like John Pombe Magufuli of Tanzania mysteriously died after he was talking and criticizing how the Western countries and the US have exploited and extorted African resources. So if these people were alive, it could be the best wish for them to see a one united Africa. And they did argue out that Africa must reclaim its destiny, and that the true independence can only be realized when Africans and all come together, transcending tribal, regional, and national divisions. And if we talk about Africa, it is sometimes so sad to talk about the black community and how people are actually talking different languages in Africa. I do not mean the languages like the one that you speak with your mouth. The languages of divisions, that's whatever I'm talking about. You see how Africa is divided. You see how Africa has not been speaking the same thing. That two African countries are fighting, and everyone is taking side with this country because their masters have taken sides on who is wrong and who is right. While children are dying in DRC Congo, when children are dying in Somalia, and when children are were dying in the Sahel, and when children and mothers do not have something to eat, They have nowhere to sleep in the Central Republic of Africa. And we hear, very glad, right? Speaking about how the continent of Africa must be developed. How are we going to develop a country full of division? We are not going to develop a country full of division. How do you, oh my goodness, how do you make Africa great without uniting these African people, without uniting the black diasporans, without bringing them back and getting them on track and bringing them to bring the skills they have? Very educated, very well-skilled people, so they can help in adjusting the development of this continent. We must first come together. We are not going to develop Africa without coming together. 55 countries in Africa, 55 currencies in Africa, with over 1,100 local tribes in Africa. Oh my goodness, we are much divided, as you might. We are much divided. So there is need for us black folks to come together, speak one language, because when you go to the US and UK and all these other countries, you are going to find African diasporans, right? They speak English, right? Which is not their language, of course. But assume them in Africa and speaking one language in Africa, right? And that language is unity. That language which we want Africa to speak is not that mother tongue or the local dialect that you know. We want Africa to speak the language of unity. We want it to be so much involved in its self interest. Let's not be talking about whatever is happening in the US. Why are you so much obsessed with something that Donald Trump is doing when your own continent, when your own country is collapsing in Africa, when your own people are dying in DRC? And I see a lot of president concentrating with whatever Donald Trump is doing in the US, leaving out the very crisis that is happening in Africa. The children of Africa have been displaced in DRC Congo just because of M23, who are being sponsored by these governments after receiving support from the US and Russia. So it is very sad to see this happening. And when I see PLO Lumumba talking about this, I know where all of this comes from. So there is need for us to unite and speak one language, the language of unity, black folks. This is whatever is going to save us. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I appreciate so much. If it's your first time, please consider subscribing, and you can become a member of the channel on a special way. Then please subscribe, share, like, comment. Thank you so much.